One little side note here, we're digressing, but that's okay. Can you imagine, if someone treated you just a small percent, a smidgen of percent, like 5%, the way we look at Jesus and the way we look at God. I'm not even talking about the pagan world, the unsaved world. I'm talking about this, how we approach Him, even in most churches. If we would treat people the way we treat Jesus sometimes, we just walk away and quit. But yet God keeps on loving us despite all that. So it's just, God's he's a God of endless mercies and love, and you got to be careful about saying that endless mercies and love, because I think it's over in Isaiah where it tells us that we should seek the Lord while He's be found and call on Him while He's near. So even God's mercy and grace, it does have a limit. But anyway, that's for another topic that we may be getting into next week. I'll let you know about that as we come in. Hey, man, it's good to have y'all tonight. So let's go ahead and finish reading in Genesis chapter 11 and take a look at this. Genesis chapter 11 is where we're reading. I think we left off in verse 7. It says, "Go to, let us," this is God speaking again, "Go to, let us," meaning the Trinity, "go down and there and confound their language so that they may not understand one another's speech. And the Lord scattered them from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did confound their language and in all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth." So this is actually the biblical recount, if you will, of the building and the destruction of the Tower of Babel. Now, there's something that you may not know, because it's not really clear in this text. We think that they started building it, then boom, God comes down and destroys it. Through history that I've looked, the book of Jasher and Antiquities of the Jews and so forth, they were building the Tower of Babel for between about 40 to 50 years. That's a long time to build something. And let me see if I can find this verse, because this is a very important verse that I want to read to you. Listen to this. I'm going to read to you the book of Jasher. Some people have that book, some people don't. It's just a history book. It doesn't take away really from what the Word of God says. It doesn't take away from proper application of scriptures. This is just a historical commentary to give you some background on what really happened, and that's why I use it as much as I do. And I'll go ahead and tell you. I got two series that I want to do by the end of this year, or as we close out this year. One, I want to do an overview of Matthew 24, and I also want to do a study on how to study the Word of God. And I'll be talking about some of these extra books of the Bible that some people think were left out. We're going to get into that sometime. But anyway, the book of Jasher, this history book, I'm going to read from it. Jasher chapter 9. Look at what chapter 9 of Jasher says. Chapter 9, verse 27 to 28. Check out what it says here. Now, this shows you this actual tower, this skyscraper of antiquity. It literally became an idol. Look at the attitude of the people while they were building it for close to 50 years. And when they were building, they built themselves a great city and a very high and strong tower. And on the account of the height, the mortar and the bricks did not reach the builders in their ascent to it until those who had went up completed a full year. Think about that. It's taken right at a year for them to lay the foundations and go to where the top of it was at this time. Now, and after that, they reached to the builders and gave them the mortar and the bricks. Thus was it done daily. So this was a daily thing from sun to sundown. Look at what verse 28 of the book of Jasher says. And this is chapter 9 again. "And behold, these ascended and others descended the whole day." Now get this, here, listen to this. "And if a brick should fall from their hands and get broken, they would all weep over it. And if a man fell and died, none of them would look at him." Think about that. The idolatry was so rampant that they no longer cared about human life, as long as this physical reminder of defiance on God. As long as we can build this, we're okay. We don't care who gets killed in the process of it. It is so sad. We have people in the world today, some of them I'm convinced in leadership position around the world, that they don't care what the consequences are, as long as they have their say, as long as they're ruling the world or the country the way they want it done. And it's really sad. I believe it's the Antiquities of the Jews that says that Nimrod ruled according to his desires. And you could do a whole study on that. The Bible tells us, I believe it's in Proverbs, that the heart of the king is in the hands of God, how he steers it and guides it how he wants to. We may think we're doing it our way, but the thing is, we're not. God's in charge. God's got the final say. And for us to sit there and tell God that my way is better than your way, that's pretty arrogant about that. So this is heavy ground that we're getting into. And now, notice I shared last week about how Nimrod was able to corrupt the youth. He was able to corrupt the youth, and I showed you how people from the 20th century, Vladimir Lenin, he said, "Give me just one generation of youth, and I'll transform a whole world." And then we had another quote here says, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future," and it's attributed to Adolf Hitler at a 1935 rally as part of the Nazi efforts to indoctrinate the youth. Now look at this. I'm going to read to you from the Antiquities of the Jews. It's another history book, and I want you to hear what it says here. I'm going to read Book 1, Chapter 4, Section 2. Let me get my glasses on here again. Chapter 4, Section 2. Now look at this. I want to read something to you. I'm going to read the first part of 114. Look what it says here. Verse 114. And it's talking about Nimrod. He also gradually procured that happiness. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God, but to bring them into a constant dependence upon his power. Notice what Nimrod was doing here. He was slowly and subtly changing the world into tyranny and bringing people into a position that they were in complete dependent on the government. Now, does that sound familiar? Do we know of any place in history where that's ever happened, where the government took its citizens and took away freedoms and liberties and so forth, and brought them to where they were dependent financially on the government? They were dependent on their rights, their protection, all that. Has that happened? That has happened so many times in the 20th century and coming into the 21st century. We can even see that now in the early 21st century. But this is what Nimrod did. And notice what was the primary function? It wasn't just to gain control, but what did he want to do? As we just read, he did it to take people's attention off of God and say, "I'm doing this, not God." What he did, he subtly destroyed the spiritual heritage and integrity of an entire generation. Well, Michael, why do you say it was an entire generation? For 50 years, almost 50 years, this was going on. Now, okay, Michael, that's nice, but is there any documentation that Nimrod got control of the kids? I'm so glad you asked. Let's go back to this wonderful history book, the book of Jasher, and I'm going to read to you Jasher chapter 7. Jasher chapter 7. Listen to what it says here. I can't believe that I didn't share it last week, but I had a million things going on in my head, and I found it this week. I said, this got to go in there this week. Chapter 7. Jasher 7, verse 38. Look at what it says about Nimrod. And here it is. They're coming back from this great war, this great battle. He's victorious, and he's about to be crowned king over all the world. Look at this, verse 38. And he, that's Nimrod, took some of their children as security, and they were all servants to Nimrod and to his brethren, and Nimrod and all the people that were with him turned homeward. Did you hear that? Nimrod actually captured children. Now, we get confused on what a child is nowadays. We think a child is 17 and younger. That's only legal issues here for this country for various reasons. I think sometimes gets abused. 18 and older, who cares? But you have to understand, back in these days, about 12 years of age, roughly, was when you became a man. So these were young, impressionable youth that Nimrod had taken. He took them captives. That means he took them away from their families, took them away from their parents and their grandparents. And what did he do? He used them for captivity, but he also, the whole time, he was indoctrinating them. Now think about that. With the quotes that we just read from some of the greatest tyrants of the 20th and 21st century. If you get a hold of youth, then you can transform the world, good or bad, and that's how it works. So this is exactly what we see coming up in Nimrod's world as he was doing this. Now, the big question, let me wet my whistle real quick. Whew. I don't know if y'all enjoy this, but this is good stuff here. I'm loving it. Sorry about that. Who was really the religious leader at the Tower of Babel? Now, I don't see him right hand. I thought, oh, here we go. If you've ever read this book, which I'm in the process of reading, The Two Babylons, or the papal worship proved to be the worship of Nimrod and his wife, who, by the way, is Semiramis. then you can get a lot of good information out there, but be very careful, because I'm about to show you the do's and the don'ts of this book. I started reading it several years ago and had to put it down because I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was just outrageous. Not that I disagree, not that I found it hard to believe. It's just there were things that were just easily proven wrong in that book. But as all books, there's going to be some good stuff in that you just have to learn how to chew up the meat and spit out the bone type thing. The writer of this book, the Reverend Alexander Hislop, believed that Semiramis was in charge of the religion at the Tower of Babel. But you know what? That's just not so historically. And I'm going to show you biblically a very strong indicator that Semiramis probably wasn't even there, because there's another man, and he's a very famous man. You just don't know his name necessarily, but we read about him through the early parts of Genesis, from Genesis chapter 11. He shows up a little bit. He also shows up in the book of Joshua, and we're going to look at him here in a minute. But it just so happens to be a man by the name of Terah, and that's Abraham's father. Now, if you were with us last week, you knew that hey, Mama Judy, how you doing? Good to have you tonight. If you're here last week, then you knew that we talked about some of the religious rites, if you will, or the aspects of what was going on with the Tower of Babel, but we didn't get too far. But tonight I want to go a little bit deeper there. Let's take our Bibles once more. Take the Bible and turn to Joshua chapter 24, and look at what's going on here. Joshua 24, and what verse we got over here? Okay, Joshua 24. I'm going to read verse 2 and verse 15. Look at what it says here. And Joshua said unto the people, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, your fathers dwelled on the other side of the flood in old time, even Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods. Verse 15. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Wow, what a proclamation. But notice what it said. Who was some of the earliest post-flood idolaters? Terah, Abraham's father. Where did he get this? Heavy-duty stuff. I want to share some more stuff to you right now about this. I'm going to turn back to the book of Joshua one more time, and we're not going to be we're going to be jumping around a lot here lately tonight. But I want to show you something. Look at what Joshua 7 says. I know I use this a lot, but there's a lot of good history in it. Joshua chapter 7, verse 49. It says this. And Terah, the son of Nahor, prince of Nimrod's host, was in those days very great in the sight of the king and his subjects, and the king and the princes loved him, speaking of Terah, and they elevated him very high. Wow. We have an idolater that's going to be lifted up high on a pedestal to a great position. And what is that for? Listen to this. And at that time, and Terah took a wife, and her name was Amphilo. She was the daughter of Cornevo, and the wife of Terah conceived and bare him a son in those days. And Terah was 70 years old when he begat him. And Terah called the name of his son that was born to him Abram, or soon to be Abraham, because the king had raised him in those days and dignified him above all his princes that were after him. I'm going to keep on reading a little bit down into chapter 8 as we continue. It says, and it was in the night that Abraham was born that all the servants of Terah and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terah, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and the conjurers went out from the house of Terah, they lifted their eyes toward the heaven that night, and they looked at the stars, and they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran into the heavens, and it swallowed up the 4 stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. Verse 3. And all the wise men of the king and all the conjurers were astonished at this sight, and the sages understood this matter, and they knew its importance. Now look at this, verse 4 of chapter 8. And they said to each other, This only betokens the child that has been born to Terah this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings and inherit their lands. If we